Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, the podcast designed to help you master the art of negotiation and win your next deal. I'm your host, John Lowry. In this episode, we are going to begin to break down the negotiation process. And the first thing that people need to know is the different types of negotiation that exist out there. There are negotiations that tend to be more competitive in nature. Those are negotiations where people are trying to grab all the value that they can. But then there are other negotiations that have more collaborative elements where people are working together to try to solve a problem. Now, the key to being successful in this moment is to know when to be competitive and when to be cooperative. And the secret is that many negotiations will have moments where they're both competitive and cooperative. I'm excited to tell you how to identify those moments and how to be strategic in those moments. Let's go ahead and get started. One of the great things I've noticed about negotiators who are able to generate outstanding outcomes is that they make very, very good decisions. And I want to think a little bit today about decision-making in the context of negotiation. Before we get to a point to where we start thinking about decisions as it relates to the substance of the deal, or what kind of concessions we're going to make when we're sitting at the table and we're going back and forth trying to make something happen. Before we even get there, there are some really important decisions that have to be made and have to be made well in terms of how we are going to approach the negotiation. Now, you would think like, oh, that's easy, but it's really not. In fact, this is what I call the negotiator's dilemma, because these decisions at the very outset, decisions that involve how you are going to manage the process, how you are going to approach the negotiation, how you are going to engage the other side, those are critically important decisions. And the reason they're so important is because if you don't make those decisions well, you can screw up the deal before you ever even get to the table. You can put yourself in a position to where there's no chance you're going to get a good deal because you haven't made good decisions related to your approach. Now, the big dilemma here, and where I find people struggle, is that they find within themselves a debate. Within their own minds, there are different motives at play. And those motives create chaos for people that don't know how to manage them very well. So, for example, there's a motive to get an outstanding deal, to go for it, to capture all the value that you can. Yet there's also a motive to actually get a deal. And there's another voice inside of your head that says there's probably going to have to be some compromise, or there's probably going to have to be some creativity and some conversation in order to get the other side to say yes. Do you hear the tension there that exists? Have you experienced it in your own negotiations? I experience it all the time when I find myself negotiating with my kids, to where at the end of the day, I can't let my child do what my child wants to do. It's just not good for them. There's no way that I can make the concession and allow them to do it because they want to do something that is not in their best interest. Usually it has something to do with what they eat or not doing homework or playing more video games or all the different things that kids do. As parents, there are some moments where we just have to say no. But at the same time, we also want to have great relationships with our kids. And so because of that desire to have great relationship, we don't want to say no. We want to say yes. We want to find ways in which we can build trust and build relationship and build likability with our kids to where our kids will want to be around us. Our kids will want relationship with us. Our kids will be eager to engage with us. And yet there are some moments, though, where despite that desire for collaboration as a family unit, there are just moments where, as a parent, you have to be competitive. You have to take your child on because you know what is in their best interest. So I want to think with you a little bit during this episode about really the two most common approaches to negotiation and the things that create the dilemma inside the head of a negotiator. And it's this desire to compete mixed with this desire to cooperate. Now, competition, it's all about claiming value. It's all about capturing as much as you can. Whereas cooperation, it can be more about giving value or creating value. So let me give you an illustration to outline this for you. Imagine with me that you're getting ready to sell your house. There's a lot of that going on these days. It is a seller's market out there in real estate. And so you want to take advantage of this incredible market and you're going to get ready to sell your house. Now you have a smaller one-story house in a neighborhood. You've done all the work to clean out all the clutter. You're in the process of staging this home in a way that it will get you top dollar. You've surveyed the market and you believe that your small little home is worth about $350,000 and that would be a good asking price for the house. Now, one day as you're cleaning out your house, you're in the garage, you're working to get it in great shape so that people can come and see your house, and your neighbors, who are a retired couple that live across the street in a big, giant 2-story house, they come and approach you. Now, you don't know exactly what they're coming to talk about. They're friendly folks. They always have grandchildren running around their house. It's a busy, busy house, but it's a big house. And so your neighbors approach you and they mention to you that they've noticed all of the trucks in the driveway. They've noticed the furniture that's coming in and out of your house. And they just ask you if you're getting ready to move. Now, you tell them that you are getting ready to move and that you are going to sell your house, but you haven't listed it with a real estate agent yet. And what they say next surprises you. They look at you and they're almost giddy to where they talk about the fact that they're getting older and that getting up and down the stairs to their master bedroom is getting more and more difficult, and that they have a need for a 1-story home, but they would do anything to stay in the neighborhood because their grandchildren live just down the street. They've been looking for a 1-story house in the neighborhood for years, and it's only grown more difficult in this market, and they haven't had any luck. And then they ask you the big question. And the big question is, how much are you asking for your house? So let's pause there. Tell me, what would your answer be? Some of you would be like, well, of course you're going to ask for more than $350,000. You got a hungry buyer right there. They have lots of reasons to stay in the neighborhood. This is an opportunity to capture value. That's the competitive voice. But then there's some of you that you would perhaps have a different approach. Instead of asking for $375,000 or $400,000 when you originally planned on asking for only $350,000, there are others of you that would say, what's the problem? Why would you ask for more? You wanted $350,000. You've probably got a great buyer who's ready to pay that. Go ahead and say $350,000. Some of you might even go farther. You might even say, well, it's my neighbor, and my neighbor, if I can sell it to them, they're going to save on real estate commission. And so I'll give them a deal. And there's some of you that may even say, well, I was going to say $350,000, but for you, and if we can do this without realtors, I'll do it for $345,000 or maybe even $340,000. Now, see the tension? Feel the tension here? Here's a moment where at the end of the day, these are your longtime neighbors. These are people that you've shared life with at some level. But at the end of the day, this is also one of your greatest investments that you want to maximize in your home. And so there is a voice that says, no, we got to compete. There's another voice that says, no. This is a moment where cooperation. This is mixed motives. This is the negotiator's dilemma. And so one of the decisions that has to be made before a negotiation ever even starts is how competitive or how cooperative should I be in order to get the best deal? Because As you think about this decision, notice that this decision, it's not just one way or the other throughout the entire negotiation. It may be one to where you start cooperatively, but you have to become more competitive as the negotiation plays out. Or it's one to where you start really competitively and you realize, no, the better way to get a deal here is to take a more cooperative approach. So what I want to do today is I want to give you 4 ideas for managing the mixed motives that we can't avoid. These mixed motives that are inside the head of every negotiator. This decision in terms of how you're going to manage these motives and how you're going to manage them well. So first thing is you have to know the game that you are playing. Now, what do I mean by the game that you are playing? Well, by the game, what I'm looking at is you have to be observant. You have to have some level of understanding in terms of the people that you are negotiating with and what is driving them. You've got to have some understanding of the situation and how much leverage you have in the situation. And so it's really important to know as best you can, and there's no way to know for sure always, but it's really important to know, is the person that I'm negotiating with, are they approaching this from a more competitive standpoint or a more cooperative standpoint? There are moments where in the midst of this, people will tell you without telling you. And so the way that they will do that is they will give a signal with the moves that they make. And really sophisticated negotiators, they're looking for those signals and they know the symbolism of those signals. So you may have someone that you're working with who they're like, oh, we want to create a mutual win. We're all about a win-win. They're using all of this language, and then yet when they put their first number on the table or their first proposal on the table, it's absolutely one-sided. What does it tell you? It tells you that even though they're talking about cooperation and collaboration and mutual wins, the reality is they're very interested in their own win. That's a moment where they are ready to be competitive, and the way that you pick up on it is by analyzing their move. And so in negotiation, you've got to look for both the substantive and the symbolic value of every move. The symbolic value is the information that you receive on how the other is playing the game. And once you know how they're playing the game, now you know the game that you're in, and hopefully can make really good decisions on how to go win it. Second thing is you can't be cooperative in the midst of competition. So here we have to be very careful about being exploited. And some of us, it is just our natural instinct to be very cooperative. That's how we want the world to be. That's what we want to contribute to the world. That's the kind of people we want to be. But the reality is that in negotiation, that desire to be cooperative, while it can be very effective, it can also be very dangerous. It's perilous to be cooperative and predictable because there are people out there that instead of responding to it and reciprocating, they will respond to it by exploiting it. And you've got to be careful in dealing with those folks. It's the number one reason why people will lose and lose badly in a negotiation. It's because they're trying to be cooperative, yet they're dealing with people that are competitive and are willing to take value. And so as we think about this, there are moments where as we analyze what the other side is doing, we have to be ready to respond. And so if you find yourself in one of these situations to where the other side is being competitive, despite everything inside of you that wants to be cooperative, this is a moment where you have to be competitive. You've got to match their move. You've got to, at times, retaliate. There are moments where you have to say no, and you have to shut down the process because the outcome that you're headed toward is not going to be a good outcome. And so recognize that competition, there are people that have no problem with it. They embrace it It's part of who they are. And those are people that you will run into in business, in organizations, in churches, in life. Everywhere you go, there are those people. You've got to be ready to deal with them, which at times means you've got to be ready to be competitive. All right, third thing. Sometimes it actually takes competition to produce cooperation. Now, you sit in here and you go, well, that seems a little weird. And it kind of is. It's counterintuitive. But it is one of the ironic truths of mixed motives. And that is that it takes competition to finally incentivize someone to be cooperative. All right, so think about it for a minute. If a competitive party is able to get a bunch of concessions from someone who they're negotiating with who's willing to be really cooperative, then why should that competitive person ever change strategies? Why would they ever need to? They're winning. And so as a result of that, they really shouldn't change strategies. But notice with me what happens when we find ourselves in a moment where someone is taking a competitive approach to a negotiation, and then we respond in kind, and we match that with some competition of our own. There's a moment where it creates some distance to resolution or distance to a deal. Now you will see how competitive or cooperative someone is willing to be. If they don't become more cooperative, the reality is they're not that interested in the deal, or they feel like they have a lot of leverage. But if they really need the deal, if they really want to get something worked out, here's the moment where, in the response to the competition that you lay out on the table, they will become more cooperative. But notice, it's only when you put it on the table that both of you will lose or that the deal won't happen. It's only in that moment where they really have a strategic decision to make. And they've got to decide, do we not want to have the deal happen, or do we want to have this process hit pause? Do we want to declare impasse? Or do I want to be more cooperative and continuing making progress towards a deal? That's the moment that you will know. But if you don't create that moment with a little competition, then it will never happen. All right, fourth thing, and that is that we have to recognize that there is a cost to competition. So we've been talking about all these things, and you may be sitting there listening going, is he telling me to be competitive or is he telling me to be cooperative? Well, this is the fun of negotiation because it's messy strategically. It is literally, there's not a perfect formula for how to manage this in every single negotiation. If someone tells you that, be skeptical because it doesn't exist. What I want to help you understand is the dynamics that are at play so that you then can make really, really good decisions. This is the fourth dynamic. And that is that competition is hard on relationships. And so the sophisticated negotiators, they recognize that there's a cost to competition because being too competitive at the wrong time in the negotiation, it can break down trust between the parties. It can impact the communication between the parties. And as a result of that, it can shut down opportunities for cooperation. As a result, it can be a lot more difficult to get a deal done, to make something happen. And so, as a negotiator, you must be careful to not win the battle but lose the war. We've kind of heard that statement before, but it's really, really important here to where we can be really competitive and we can win a couple of rounds of the negotiation as we're working towards a deal. But if in doing that, we blow up the relationship or we blow up the communication between the party that we're dealing with, getting that deal to the finish line can be very, very difficult. Now, there are some times that you will get that deal to the finish line, but what will happen is that person that you're negotiating with will never want to do business with you again. Now, if you're selling a house or you're selling a used car, so be it. You may not ever see that person again and you don't have to worry about that. But what if you're negotiating with your boss? What if you're negotiating with a colleague at work? What if you're negotiating with one of your children? That's not someone to where you want to blow up the relationship, because that's a person or that's somebody that you're going to have continued healthy relationship with in order to get what you're really looking for in life. And so I'm not saying go be competitive and competitive wins the day. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it can actually really, really hurt what you're trying to achieve. All right, the fifth thing is the best deals. The people who are the absolute best negotiators, those who know how to get things done. These are people that have mastered when to be cooperative and when to be competitive. Now, how is it that we follow their lead? How is it that we get these good deals? Well, let me ask you this question. Competitive people, do they get good deals? Absolutely, they do. They get good deals because they're not willing to be vulnerable and because they're ambitious. And so they're willing to ask for the things that they want. And as a result of that, this process tends to reward that. And so competitive people get good deals. Now, here's the kicker. Do cooperative people get good deals? They absolutely do. And the reason that cooperative people get good deals is because they're able to establish trust. They're able to get the other side, because of that trust, to be vulnerable and to put things on the table and to provide information that can be useful in creatively constructing a really great deal. So, who gets the best deals? Well, the people that get the best deals are the folks that know when it's the right time to be competitive and when it's the right time to be cooperative. And they are skilled in carrying out whatever strategy is required in the moment. Now, basically, in terms of making that judgment, that's where your experience comes in. That's where the importance of the relationship comes in. All of that feeds into, is this a moment to be competitive or is this a moment to be cooperative? So let me bring this home for you, give you something very practical to go think about as you consider this dynamic that may be brand new for you, but one that you now have some tools to think about as you have to manage. And so I want us to first develop the eyes to see. And so think back to some of your negotiations, or think back to just some of your interactions with people, whether it be at work or at home or wherever. What is a competitive move that you've recently seen in a negotiation? And how is it that you responded to it? All right? Begin to look for those competitive moves. I want you to be able to see them, because the quicker you can identify them, the better you're going to be able to respond to them. But then on the flip side, I want you to ask yourself the question, what is a cooperative move that you've seen recently in a negotiation? And how did you respond to it? What's a move to where someone was willing to be vulnerable? Someone was willing to say, yeah, I'll help you with that. And how did you respond? Our response to it's really, really important, because if people seek to be cooperative with us and we respond with competition, then there's a decent chance we're going to shut down the cooperation if they're a pretty savvy and sophisticated negotiator. So what I want you to do is I want you to be aware of these choices that are available to you. These choices are important for making really good decisions. Most people who haven't thought about negotiation at all, they just do what's comfortable or what's intuitive. But you have an opportunity to be better. Knowing the dynamics, knowing the mixed motives that are going on inside your head, being aware of them, you now have the opportunity to go from just what is intuitive or comfortable and now allowing your decision-making to become very strategic. And the moment that you're able to get there is the moment where you will make better decisions as you develop a strategy for each negotiation. And that strategy, once executed in the midst of trying to work that deal out, that strategy will lead to better outcomes. So, competition, cooperation, these are the voices, these are the desires, these are the motives within us. There are two things that can lead us to great deals. There are also two things that can be traps. Our job is to manage them well, to figure out what tool and when to use it, and to know that a good balanced approach where we're competitive and we're cooperative in the right moments with the right people, that is the recipe to delivering an outstanding deal. All the best as you go out and manage those mixed motives.